Hello there, right here we got a brand new version of 1.18. This is 1.18 pre-release 2, all a part of the Caves and Cliffs update number 2. First, we'll take a look at the new features in this version, then we'll talk about some new information about 1.19, then we'll talk about some potential changes about how mobs pick up items, and then lastly we'll look at all the different bug fixes that were made since the last one. So make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, and let's get started. So the first thing that they changed here in pre-release 2 is that they now have Minecraft use the 17th version of the Java program. As you guys know, Minecraft Java runs on Java, and Java actually has different versions, and they're always updating them. And Java version 17 is the newest, coming out just the last September. And this version is considered a long-term support. So even though they're going to come out with versions after that, Minecraft might not actually update to those versions and might stick with this one until the next long-term support version comes out. And if you're using the default launcher, it will automatically use the correct version of Java. Otherwise, you would have to go into installations and then choose a new installation, choose your version, and then go in here where it says edit, and then you could come in here and choose exactly where you want it to execute from. Now they also came out with a bunch of bug fixes, which I'll cover at the end of the video. Some of them are pretty fascinating, but now we're gonna look at some 1.19 sneak peeks. Minecraft also came out with their Ask Mojang, where the Mojang devs answer questions. And this one was mostly about 1.19. King B-Dogs answers, what is the lore behind the deep dark cities?
These cities, they come from an ancient civilization, but
and that is all the information he gives. That's kind of like a lot of things in Minecraft. We really don't know who sailed like the ships that are in the shipwrecks. The players can kind of make up their own stories behind it. And that's one thing that Minecraft have said in the past, that they want to give the players different objects and let them kind of create the story behind it. They also talk about the loot that is in the Deep Dark, and they explain that they don't want the loot to be too similar to other places that have chests and loot. So they want it to be unique, but they also don't want it to be just upgrade for like the most powerful armor or weapons. Instead, they want it to be specific items that can do really unique things that are useful into the game. So think of stuff maybe like a compass or a clock. These objects do things that are kind of small but are definitely useful. So knowing this, what items do you think they should put in the chest? These would be brand new items, of course, so you can make up something that you think would be useful to have in game. For me, I really like them to have a machine that can automatically break down like flowers into dyes, or bones into bone meal, or blaze rods into blaze powder. It's kind of a small thing, but it's actually really useful, especially in end game. It wouldn't be considered too OP like a complete auto crafting system. The next thing they answer is, will the warden attack other mobs? And the answer is yes, so pretty much any mob would be attacked by these guys, sort of like the Zoglin. I think this is a really cool aspect, but I think on top of this, they should also add it so that the warden can also break blocks in its environment. Otherwise, a player can just like run through the maze of the end city and the warden wouldn't really be able to pathfind to get to him. So if the warden had some kind of ability to break like Deep Slate or their variants, it would make it pretty interesting and also more powerful than just this big lumbering creature. The next interesting question that they answer has to do with fireflies, asking will there be an ambient mob or will the player be able to collect them and interact with them? So for the fireflies, they do want things to interact with it. Obviously they want like the frogs to eat them, but they currently are just particles. So they're not like entities with hitboxes. So this part is still under development. They would like players to interact with them, but they also have to be concerned about performance, because if you have tons of these guys going around, it would slow down your game. But as particles, the game can have 1,000 particles and have no problem. So we'll have to wait and see how they do this in the game. They also explain why you use water bottles to make mud rather than just buckets of water, because obviously if you place a bucket of water on any dirt, it would convert everything to mud, which would be a big problem. My question is, would there be a more automated way of making mud? I did actually already make a mud farm if you guys seen my past videos, but it'd be cool if you can hook like a dispenser near this with some water bottles inside and then apply that to the block that's in front. Kind of like how glass bottles can pick up water and fill up water bottles. But this would just be the opposite, it'd be them dispensing the water. So I feel like it's very easily added into the game. What do you guys think about that? And they confirmed that there will be no mud pies, even though they're coming out with the mud block. When I was younger, we used to make all sorts of types of mud fake food. And despite it obviously being fake food made out of random things that we find in the woods, it seemed like our parents would always remind us not to actually eat it. They also explain how the allay works, which I already covered in this video here. But essentially it doesn't duplicate items, it just picks them up. And it can only hold so many. And then there's a whole bunch of other more details that I covered in this video, which I'll link down below. One of the Mojang devs, King B-Dogs, asked for feedback about how to deal with mobs that have persistence after they pick up an item. The example is a zombie picks up a seed that falls on the ground, and now that he's holding an item, the game will automatically not have him despawn, no matter how far he is away from the player. And these zombies also don't count to the mob cap, so new ones can be spawned in, those can pick up items, and this can keep going on and on and on. We had a similar problem like this in the past where when they introduced chicken jockeys, the chickens would lay eggs and then the zombies would pick them up and they'd never be able to despawn, and they just would build up over time. There'd be hundreds and hundreds of zombies. And that was a big problem I had in the past, where I had to go into caves and clear out all these zombies, which are creating a lot of lag, especially inside of spawn chunks. Now this only occurs to zombies that have the pickup loot tag, which can almost be as high as 50% on hard difficulty. And they did try to combat this problem in the past, the chickens from the chicken jockeys don't actually lay eggs. And then when they came out with like glow squids, they made it so that zombies are unable to actually pick up the glow squid sack. But there's still cases where squid die and then they can pick up those and the same problem occurs. So because there just keeps coming out with new items and different ways that zombies can end up picking up these items, they want to kind of come out with a one-time fix that will solve this forever, rather than making special cases like baby piglins can't pick up leather and all the different weird bizarre cases. They want to make it so that zombies can only pick up items that are tagged as being dropped by the player. So if the player dropped it, it would be okay for the zombie to pick it up. They also said that this would apply to dispensers as well as droppers. So anything that comes out of these, they would also be able to pick up. So they want to know if they add this change, will this actually affect anything in the game? Now, one case where we do use this is if you have a mob farm and you're having these mobs killed by player, you could drop them items during the process of transporting them to the player before he kills them. That way they no longer count to the mob cap and more of them can spawn in, making the farm slightly faster. Now, I've used this in the past, like in my old Wither Skeleton farm, but if they add it so that allows items that come out of dispensers and droppers to also work, then it wouldn't really affect that farm, because a lot of the items that you give to these guys, you end up sorting out again and then dropping back out with these. So where this could have an effect is inside of mob farms where the player is killing them. So they're sitting there for a while before the player actually kills them. And as some of them die, the other ones are going to pick up their items. And these aren't items that the player drops, but instead items that the previous dead mobs dropped. And they just automatically pick them. Now this is typically unintended in farms, but does occur. But what is even more likely to occur is that the mobs you kill have armor or weapons. And then when new zombies come in, they pick up those armor. I'm guessing this isn't going to change. Maybe armor and tools and weapons are considered differently than other items like the rotten flesh he's holding. Now these guys actually picking up the armor does cause some problems to the player. It does make them a little bit harder to kill, and they could have thorns on armor which could actually damage the player. But if your collection system doesn't pick up the items, the next zombie is just going to pick it up all over again. The process kind of repeats. Now we do talk about zombies in this situation a lot because they are the few mobs that have nothing in their hand typically when they spawn in, so they're easy to give them items. But the can pick up item tag can occur to a lot of different mobs. In this case here I have a piglin, and I purposely gave this guy an item to pick up, that way he wouldn't despawn. Now with this change it wouldn't affect that. These guys would still not despawn as the item would be dropped as player means. In this case I actually gave this guy a sword or some armor, and he happily put it on and will no longer despawn. So I'm just going to assume that they're not going to change anything to do with mobs picking up armor or weapons. Now besides the mobs actually not despawning if they pick up other loot, there's another case scenario that we need to keep in mind, and that is items don't actually despawn if they're constantly being picked up and dropped again by a mob. And this actually occurs inside of my Pigman XP gold farm. When the pigmen come in and they die, they're considered player kills, so they can drop their weapons, including their swords. And if a pigman comes in who doesn't have an enchanted sword, but there's one that's down there and he can pick up new loot, he will pick up that new enchanted sword, then he will die, meaning that this sword gets picked up, the despawn timer for it gets reset. Now there's still this scenario in the game where zombies can't decide if they like something that's enchanted with low durability or something that's unenchanted with higher durability. And the same thing can occur in pretty much any farm, and it causes them to constantly swap out their items. Now this mechanic is actually useful for sorting out armor, and it has some properties that we can't just do with using like a armor stand armor sorter. But there's other mobs besides the zombie that actually have by default being able to pick up items. Dolphins are one of them. They can pick up items. So I don't know how this is going to affect them, because they can pick up like kelp that just breaks off, or they can end up picking up like treasure. If you break a chest, they can pick some of that up. I'm not sure if they will change these guys' behavior, because I think it's kind of cool that these guys just randomly pick up stuff. Another thing to keep in mind is that when the player breaks a block, the block drops and isn't considered from the player. So I wonder if that's going to also affect like zombies. Another mob that does picking up items is the fox. And these guys just love picking up random items. Of course, if it's a food, then they'll end up eating it. And I think that's what's kind of cool about dolphins and foxes, is that they don't just pick up the player's items. They just find some random item that's in the area. Maybe a villager give you a hero of the village gift, and these guys would just come by and pick up that item. But if they did change it so that these guys can only pick up player items or ones from droppers or dispensers, it wouldn't be such a big deal. If you guys know of any different scenarios that this could affect, let me know down in the comments. Next, we're going to take a look at all the different bugs that got fixed by the Mojang developers since the last pre-release, and we'll see how this affects the gameplay. They finally came in and changed out the bottom minecarts. If you would look at them in spectator mode, you can see this old brown texture, and that was actually used way back in alpha when minecarts were used for storage. So now the bottom is gray. They changed out the texture that is behind a painting, as it is the wood type. It is actually a mirrored image of the existing wood texture. You can see the left is the painting and the right is the actual block. And now it looks like this. There was also a problem when goats would catch on fire, they wouldn't actually pathfind to water to put themselves out. Look at that guy go around. They resolved the issue when the game would place you into a new world. If they would choose like ocean biome, there would be massive performance issues when loading up that world. There was a strange issue where in some worlds among some areas, the game wasn't putting in any passive mobs during natural generation. They fixed another problem where lava pockets were being generated inside of icebergs, producing these funny structures. With old chunks having mine shafts and the new caves underneath also producing mine shafts, there was a problem that the game was actually causing duplicates of the mine shaft, which is now resolved. In the last pre-release, structures that are supposed to spawn in special mobs like witches get produced in witch huts weren't actually occurring, so now once again it's working as normal. There was also a few bugs that occurred when upgrading your world, like this one where vines were being placed in the wrong directions when upgrading. Fences were also being placed in very oddly, look at all these stubs. And the same thing was happening with redstone. There's also this problem where old alpha worlds, when upgraded, were producing holes that were going all the way down to Y level 0, kind of like what we've seen with the generated fossils. And they fixed a problem where upgrade data in a chunk was not migrating to the new world height. There was still the problem that big dripstone structures were making their way out of the ground and above on the surface. There were still problems that the water and lava in caves wasn't updating. Also, chests weren't being in the correct state when updating worlds. Chunk borders were also cutting off of fossils, so they looked really strange. Ravines were still allowing water to be placed over top of them, making these weird water canopies. There was a problem that the allow server listing option wasn't saving, so if you would turn it on, it would just automatically turn off again next time, which has now been resolved. The majority of the bug fixes were actually a whole bunch of different types of spelling errors, people missing, as well as inconsistencies within the credits of Minecraft. This also included them adding back in the Explore, Dream, Discover quote into this. Server addresses were also showing that there was a connection fail during their server setup. And during these fails, it was actually leaking the IP of servers. They also fixed two different crashes. One of them that would occur when loading new chunks in an upgraded world. The other one being if you would increase your world border beyond the 30 million point. There was a problem where old chunks would have one type of biome, like this is a desert up here, but the new caves as well as new blocks placed below Y level 0 would have a completely different biome. So now this is a bamboo jungle down here. Now they do want to have the new dripstone caves as well as lush caves be spawned in the old chunks, but in the new underground parts of it. But these could potentially cause problems, such as in the lush caves, these guys can produce axolotls as well as tropical fish in an area where typically there might not be any possibility of that occurring. So if you have like a farm that's up here in your world and then you get these new deeper chunks and you decide to move it down lower, you might have trouble with these new mobs spawning inside of it. Despite this whole thing being technically in an old area, and therefore Minecraft shouldn't really affect your game, but it actually is. There's also a problem where powered buttons or pressure plates or tripwire hooks would remain powered when updating old worlds to the new versions. Biomes that were having biome-specific mobs spawn in them were having drastically reduced rates of them spawning. So like taigas weren't actually producing any foxes. They also resolved this weird bug where if you're sprinting while flying and you hit a block, your whole screen would keep jittering like your player wants to keep sprinting forward. They also resolved this bug where water from old chunks weren't properly flowing into the new chunks. Check out this playlist to see rare and discontinued items and blocks throughout the version, or this one to learn about secrets in Minecraft. We recently reached 400,000 views on Twitch, which is just insane. Thanks to everybody who joins my streams. They're every Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're getting really close to 40,000 followers, so if you haven't already, hop on over there, the link below, and follow me. Thank you for all your support, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye!